In this lecture I'm going to look at some more trends vocabulary, a wider variety of trends vocabulary. Here are those 7 words: fluctuate, remain steady, stabilise, stagnate, overall, upwards and downwards. So the first word is fluctuate. Fluctuate. So when numbers fluctuate, they go up and down, usually very quickly. So for example, from 2004 to 2010, numbers fluctuated between 25 and 40. So they went up and down and up and down. You could also say from 2004 to 2010, numbers fluctuated around the 30 mark. Some common collocations with fluctuate: fluctuate wildly and fluctuate widely. So they go up and down a lot. They mean the same thing. Fluctuate around the number 30. Fluctuate between. So as a verb you can say fluctuates, fluctuating, fluctuated. You can also use the noun fluctuation. Fluctuation. It's a very specialised word, fluctuate, so there aren't many synonyms. Hover. So you could say hovered around 30. Or perhaps a word like shift, shifted. But there aren't any very good synonyms for fluctuate. Remain steady. Remain steady. If numbers remain steady, it means the numbers stayed about the same. Either the same or about the same level. It's kind of the opposite to fluctuate, so they're not going up and down. Not by much. So between 2000 and 2003, numbers remained steady. So remain steady. You can have remain steady, remaining steady, remained steady. And some synonyms: stayed the same, possibly stabilised. But stabilise means something slightly different, which I'll look at now. So stabilise, it's used to show contrast between a steady period and something that came before when it was unsteady, when it was not steady, when it was unstable. So if numbers fluctuated and afterwards remained steady, then we can say that numbers stabilised, they became steady. So before 2009, numbers were fluctuating. Then they stabilised for a year. So we could say between 2004 and 2009, numbers fluctuated before briefly stabilising until 2010. Or between 2000 and 2004, numbers stabilised around the 75 mark. Before that, they were higher, then lower, they were unstable, and then they stabilised. So you can say stabilise at, stabilise around, briefly stabilise, suddenly stabilise. And here are the verb forms for stabilise. You can also have the noun form stabilisation, but it's not very commonly used. Some synonyms: remain steady, fixed, is sustained. So numbers were sustained for several years, or maintained. Stagnate is your next word. Stagnate. When something stagnates, it stops developing or growing And it's used more when talking about growth and development rather than simply numbers. And it suggests something bad. There's little growth, whereas before and maybe afterwards there was lots of growth. So if this graph were about growth, we could say the sentence, after a precipitous decline in 2004, growth stagnated. For another 6 years, there was no growth in this period. It was stagnating. Or you could say there was a period of stagnation between 2004 and 2010. You might want to say stagnated suddenly stagnated, or a period of stagnation. It's a verb, stagnate, so here are the verb forms. And there's the noun stagnation. And some synonyms. Languish is a nice word. Languish. Numbers languished at around 30 for several years. Stand still, stood still. Stall. Growth stalled. Your next word is overall. Overall. Overall is a way of talking about the whole graph, the whole picture, the whole trend. So you talk about the entire graph with overall. So for example, overall, the numbers in this period declined by approximately 25. That's from 1998 to 2016. The overall trend is one of two periods at a high level with a low period in between. So you're talking about the big picture, the whole graph. The overall trend is a common collocation. The overall picture. The overall pattern. So they're all using overall here as an adjective. But you can also use overall as an adverb as well. So as an adjective or an adverb doesn't change, the form doesn't change. But some synonyms for overall in general. Generally speaking. General. And your next word is upward. Upward. And we're also going to look at downward. Downward is the next word, so upwards and downwards. So they're very useful general terms. So you could say, between 2015 and 2016, there was a slight upward trend. So it's an adjective. Upward trend. You can use it as an adverb, move upwards, rise upwards. Well, actually, of course, you wouldn't say rise upwards, actually, because rise suggests going up already. But move doesn't suggest going up or down. But it does when you say upwards. An upward trend, an upward movement, upward direction. Finally, downward. Downward. From 2011 to 2015, there was a prolonged downward spell. Prolonged means for a long time. There was a sharp downward movement between 2003 and 2004. So you move downwards. You can have a downward trend. Downward movement. Downward direction. So there are your seven words. Some more words for trends: fluctuate, remain steady, stabilize, stagnate, overall, upwards, and downwards.